Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor. And today I have with me Ruchi Koval. Hi, how are you?
Good. Baruch
Thank you.
Hashem.
Thank you so much for joining us
My
today.
pleasure. Happy to be here.
Okay, so could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? Where do you live and what do you do?
Sure. So I am almost 48 years old. My birthday is next week. Um, I live in Cleveland, Ohio. I am married. I have seven kids and two kids in law, Baruch Hashem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the
Oh,
kids range
nice.
in age from 27 to 12. My husband and I run a Kirov organization in Cleveland. So I'm an educator, I'm an author, I'm a musician, I blog, I'm active on social media. I am very social, very extroverted. I come from a huge family. So I'm out there.
So, did you grow up in Cleveland? Like, are you from
Yeah,
Cleveland?
yeah, yeah. My husband and I both grew up in Cleveland. We actually lived right near each other growing up.
Wow. Did you guys like meet on your own or somebody set you up?
So it depends. The answer to that question depends on whether you ask me or my husband.
Okay.
Um, the story that he told me a long time ago is that he used to watch me walking home from school,
Oh,
and he thought I was cute.
that's so
Um,
cute.
but he was like a good yeshiva boy, so he didn't do anything about it until he was dating. And then he actually told his mother that he would like to date me, which I think is pretty gutsy for a yeshiva guy.
Definitely.
And but now that he's like a rabbi, he'll be like, "Oh, we had a shadchan." Yeah, we
That's so
hired the
funny.
shadchan to take
Yeah,
care of business. But
that's
we
so
actually
funny.
dated in Israel, and when we were first married, we lived in Israel for 5 years, and then
Mhm.
my husband's first rabbi job was in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. We lived there for 2 years, and then we moved back to Cleveland.
So your husband's always been a rabbi since you guys got married,
No,
basically, no?
he was in Koval when we first got married, and we didn't really know exactly what he was going to do. We were very young, and we figured we would figure it out as we go. And then along the way, he decided to go into Kirov, which was sort of a plot twist for both of us.
Oh.
It took me a while to come around to that identity, but now I fully embraced it.
You weren't involved in Kira like when you were a teenager or anything like that. Like you didn't see yourself doing that.
No, not at all.
I totally see that, like matching your personality. That's so funny. Okay, so first I wanted to just start with really a little bit about your like relationship with food, your relationship to body image. Like I know we were talking about it a little bit we start before we started recording. So like what was your journey like in terms of like you said before, dieting, non-dieting, like what was that like?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I was one of those enviable people who, like, I was naturally skinny. I never really had to worry about dieting or exercising or anything like that. And I didn't do any of those things. Um, there was a little bit of like survivor guilt in that because I felt like, oh, well, that's something that everybody struggles with. How come I don't have to struggle with that? That's weird.
How old were you when you thought that? I'm just curious.
I would say in high school, like probably 10th grade is when that started, like noticing that everybody else seemed to be unhappy with their body and I wasn't, and that was weird.
It's actually interesting though, because like just what I see in my work is that like skinny girls and girls that aren't skinny go through that. Like like it's always like a push to be skinnier, like even if you are skinny. So I guess you're lucky that you didn't feel that way.
I did not feel that way. I wasn't happy with every aspect of my body, don't get me wrong, but in terms of being overweight, that's not really something that I thought about until later. Um, I do remember being a kid. I must have been in elementary school, and I used to hear the adults saying that they were on a diet, and I didn't know what that meant. The only thing that I could think of was there was always a bottle of diet soda on our table, on our Shabbos table. So I thought that being on a diet somehow meant that you would put something on the soda bottle that said diet. Like
Wow.
in my literal mind, like I couldn't figure
Right.
out what it meant.
I guess nobody in your house is talking about it either, right? Like if it
Well, my
wasn't.
mother would talk about like being on a diet and they were all drinking tab, but other than that, it wasn't really a big deal. No, I am extremely blessed, and I know this from talking to friends, that my mother was never like, not that she didn't diet or exercise, she did, but it was never like a big topic of conversation in our house. It wasn't, she never, none of my female relatives ever made comments about that. Like, this one's to me, for sure not. You know what I mean? Now I notice it all around me all the time. Everyone's talking about it, but
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with any of that kind of culture. Like, and what
So
I'm saying is like directed toward me. I definitely was around me.
are you a lot of sisters, a lot of brothers? Like what's the family?
So my family of origin, there's four sisters and three brothers.
So that's a lot of girls. So that you're really lucky that it wasn't like just one of those things that went
Yeah,
around in
it
your house.
wasn't. It wasn't
Yeah.
a thing. Mm-mm.
So did you start dieting when you got older? Did you start, were you like around a lot of people that were talking about it, like when you were
So
married? Like,
the first time I really was like noticed it to be an issue was when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and um, I started because my body started changing obviously. And I remember looking around. We were living in Israel then, and my husband was in Koval. And I remember looking around at these other Koval wives and thinking how some people still looked skinny while they were pregnant. Like they had these like their collarbones stuck out, or you know what I mean. Like I was like, more busty and just not like I wasn't a skinny person. I just never had a weight problem. But then when I was pregnant, I felt like my body was sort of spiraling out of control, in a way that bothered me. Obviously it was a tremendous simcha and I was so happy, but I remember feeling like, whoa, like this is out of control. I don't even know what to do with this. I couldn't find the right clothing. We were living in Israel and it was really hard to feel pretty in maternity clothing, especially because a big part of my identity was tied up with being skinny and people always
hmm
telling me that I was skinny. And now if I'm
right.
not skinny, then well, what am I? And um, now when I had my first child, my weight fell off. Now I was very young. I was only 20 when I had her.
hmm
My weight just fell off. And after then I had my son and then, like just a year and a half later, and my weight fell off. Like after the first two kids, I was even thinner than when I started. So I was like, okay, phew. But I remember thinking to myself, like, well, we're going to have more kids, and this is going to keep happening. I'm going to keep having to gain weight and lose it, and gain weight and lose it, like being like stressed out by that idea, the gaining weight.
How do you feel about that now? Like looking back on it, that like so much a part of like being pregnant is like being afraid of our bodies changing. Like it's such a big, like you said, it's such a big simcha, but it also comes with such like fear of like how our bodies will change.
So, of course, like what would I tell my daughter? I would tell her, oh, sweetheart, like don't even worry about that. Just enjoy this, you know, this stage, and it's such a beautiful thing. There's a miracle happening inside of your body, but you know what? When you're in your 20s and you're used to being slim and fit, it's hard. It's like telling a young mother, "Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about the messy house. That's not what really matters in the long run." I mean, that's
Right.
kind of invalidating. It does matter, and it is stressful.
For sure. For sure. So then what happened?
So after I had my third child, the weight did not fall off. And I remember how old I was when I started feeling old. I was 27, which is so ridiculous when I think back on that. That
It's
was almost
very young.
20,
It's very
20
young.
years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So a couple things happened when I turned 27. First of all, I noticed that I had one gray hair. That was very stressful. And I also started noticing that my body wasn't thin anymore.
hmm
And I went to a gym. I never joined a gym before. We were living in Buffalo Grove at the time, and I was showing, the owner of the gym, like some, which parts of myself I want to work out, because there were all those fad, like exercise programs at the time, like the hip and thigh workout, like,
hmm Yeah.
and they're like, oh, sure, you join, we'll take care of that, no problem, like as though like you're gonna, choose how to shape your body exactly, like, like a
Right.
sculptor.
Yeah.
And so I joined this gym under like, you know, I'm going to say false premises. Like, of course, I know now what exercise is and isn't, but I didn't know that then.
Right. You're also
Um,
kind of new to it, like you said. Like somebody
right.
who,
Like, I didn't even know how to diet. I did not even know how to diet. I remember when I was in seminary and a bunch of girls were going home for Pesach. I did not go home for Pesach. And a bunch of them felt that they had to diet before they saw their mothers, which I still literally do not understand. Like, pretty sure your mother saw you naked the day you were born. Like, red and screaming. I think she
right.
can handle you, but
Yeah.
some people's mothers can't really handle them. So that
Right.
happens to be true.
Yeah.
Anyway, these girls were all going into the kitchen in the dorm and taking like peppers and putting cottage cheese in the peppers. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how do they know that that's what you're supposed to eat when you're on a diet? Like I had no frame of reference at
Which
all.
is great, actually. It's so nice that you
I know
didn't,
that.
that you weren't like,
I know that
indoctrinated by
now.
that. Yeah.
So anyway, so I joined this gym and I'm trying to get my body back to, and in my mind, and again, this is so messed up, I kept thinking about the weight I was at my wedding. And somewhere in my mind, that's what I was supposed to get back to. Now, my wedding, I was literally, I had turned 19 like 2 months prior. I had a child body still. I
Hmm.
wasn't even fully a woman.
Right.
You know what I mean? And in my mind, like until I got back to that weight, like I was messy or sloppy or unaccomplished. Do you know what I mean?
Why do you think that, like, where do you think you got that belief system from? Just society?
Yeah. Comments, compliments,
Hmm.
oh my God, you look so good. You don't even look like you had a baby.
By the way, I just had a baby 11 weeks ago, and I hate when people
Mother.
say thank you. I feel like I'm very sensitive to that now because I like work with, people who have eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image stuff, and it's like it's such a funny thing that people say like I did have a baby. Like my body just did have a baby. Like it's not so crazy if it looks like it did. You know what I mean? It's such a
Right.
like interesting thing to say. So, anyways, would say that to you, and that was sort of like how you
So,
judged yourself.
no, it wasn't even that they said it to me. I'm like listening to things people tell other women.
Right.
I'm not even talking about what's directed to me. Just this is what people say, particularly women my mother's generation.
Mm-hmm.
These
For
were the
sure.
messages coming from the top down
Right.
that if you lose your weight and you get it together, check, you've accomplished,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Could I ask you how, if you're comfortable to share, like how your husband felt about your weight, or if you felt like your husband felt any way about it, or
Yeah. So Baruch Hashem, I really, really don't take this for granted. He never had an issue with the way I looked. It was always me having an issue with the way I looked.
right?
I
So,
think he even felt like he wished I wouldn't feel so. He wished that I wouldn't feel angsty about the way I looked because why should I?
right, right. So I see that a lot with my clients that like it's not obviously every woman and like husband and wife are different, but like so many times I mean I don't know how men really feel, but I just see anecdotally and from what I read that like it's more about like a woman feeling good about themselves and confident about themselves than
Yes,
like the husband doesn't want a woman to be obsessing about, when we go out to eat, I can only eat half the portion, like it's so much more enjoyable when like we just
right.
sort of like enjoy ourselves and like
Yes.
feel good about ourselves.
And also my husband, every now and then he wants to bring me home a treat. And like for a while he was like, well, he couldn't keep track. Like I do like these
Right,
cookies. I'm not going to eat these
right,
cookies now.
right, right.
These fruits are good or these fruits are bad. They have too much sugar. It's like poor guy. Like he's
Yeah,
just trying to do something nice and the rules are
right.
always changing.
Yeah, yeah, that's so typical for sure. And he was just trying to like bring you something that you liked, and like there was just
Yeah.
so many rules,
Yeah.
like diet rules. So then what happened?
Um, so yeah, so I'm drinking in all these messages about how like you've got to lose that weight. And not only that you've got to lose that weight, but that it's totally in your hands.
Right.
If you just do X, Y, and Z and you have the willpower and you're hardworking enough, you can do it. I was also influenced, I have to say. I don't even remember where I was because we certainly didn't have a TV then, but somewhere along the line, I watched The Biggest Loser.
Mm-hmm. I watched that too.
So, I mean, for those who don't know, it's a reality TV show, which has recently been, kind of debunked as being like
Yeah.
really super damaging,
Yeah.
not just emotionally and psychologically, but physically to people's
Yes.
metabolisms and mental health. But it's this reality TV show where they take people who are, labeled obese, morbidly obese, what have you, and they have them do these extreme diet and exercise programs, and then whoever loses the most weight, is the winner. Um, and
They
I,
exercise like 5, 6 hours a day.
yeah,
They don't eat a lot. Yeah.
and I don't remember if I watched the show or if I was reading about the show, but I was like, oh, so it's really just a formula, like 2 + 2 = 4. If you do X, Y, then you'll get Z,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So somewhere in my head, this was just a matter of process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we moved to Cleveland, and then I had my fourth child. Now, I remember sitting in the hospital room after giving birth to my fourth child. I was reading a lot about diets at this point. That was
So
the low
you
carb.
you were like all in at this point. It sounds like you're all in. Like dieting has become like majorly a part of your life.
So I would sort of like vacillate. Like sometimes I was super into it, and then I was like, well, this is ridiculous. I can't I can't live like this, you know. And then you would read, well, diets are not good, just a lifestyle is good, and you have to be able. So I'm like, could I really not eat carbs like for the rest of my life? You know, and you
Yeah.
would hear people who say they do. They're off white sugar and white flour. Like,
Right.
you're like, I couldn't live like that. Do I really want
Right.
to live for the rest of my life without eating challah or pizza? Nope, I
Right.
don't.
Right.
So I was confused. I wasn't really sure, what I wanted to do. I was conscious even at that point not to talk about it in front of my kids. Like I would say, but it was sort of like a code. Like, well, I just want to be healthy, which now I know is really it's just a code.
Right.
Healthy doesn't really mean anything. It could mean 100 different things to 100 different people.
Right.
But I was conscious enough not to talk about losing weight in front of my kids, not to talk negatively about my body in front of my kids that much. I knew I did not want to pass that along to my daughters, and Baruch Hashem, I really didn't. Um, but when I had my fourth kid, and at that point I was in my 30s, and I remember sitting in the hospital room and thinking to myself, so should I eat the bread with jelly or the bread with butter? Which is worse?
Mm-hmm.
Is sugar the bad guy? Is fat the bad guy? Or are carbs the bad guy? Who knows?
Right.
And now I'm
Actually,
thinking
right.
about that I had had a baby the previous day, and that's what I was worrying about.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't talk about it out loud to other people because I was embarrassed that I was on a diet, so to speak. I wouldn't admit that out loud because somewhere I knew that that was messed up. Um,
Really, you didn't have like friends like around you, like sort of like exchanging like what diets they were on? It wasn't like
I mean, I
common
had
sense?
one friend who we would like every now and then we would get into like a health craze and we would go shopping for whole wheat crackers and what have you. But generally speaking, I sort of thought it was beneath me to be on a diet that was so banal. I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
that.
Like you thought it
So,
was like being materialistic or like obsessed with the way you look?
no,
Mm.
um, like sort of like the herd mentality. Like everybody's dieting. Okay, I'm dieting too. Like
Right. I hear you.
sort of maybe shallow. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know exactly.
Okay, so it wasn't something that you were like openly talking about all the
No,
time. You know those
no,
people.
no. But it was in my head all the time. And then later, when I started counting calories, like I downloaded my Fitness Pal and I was, putting all my calories into my phone, it was like constant, frantic math
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And
Right.
it was like, that was really crazy. And also trying not to let on that I was counting my calories. So,
Because you
really.
didn't want your kids to know, you didn't want your husband to know, you didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah, I didn't really want anyone to know. I felt like it was kind of petty, stupid, pointless, shallow, sheep, like following like a sheep, like everything you read, every fad mentality.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like that was took up a lot of your headspace because it wasn't just like the thoughts of like how many calories am I eating and how much am I eating or weight or anything like that. It was also like trying to hide that you were doing that.
Right. Right. And weighing myself a lot. I was weighing myself a lot. Like I knew how much weight I lost from the morning to the night.
Hmm. So you were really, it sounds like you were really obsessed. Like it really took over like a lot of
I
your
was kind of
headspace.
obsessed. Yeah.
Yeah. So then did you notice that it was taking over? You noticed that it was like something that you didn't want to be doing anymore? Did you read something? Did you learn about intuitive eating? Like how
So
did that
I
change?
believe it or not, I like remember two things. First of all, I was taking a shower, and in the shower, I was going ready to go to sleep at night, and I was thinking to myself, "Gosh, I'm hungry." And I had, fulfilled my calorie intake for the day or whatever, and I was like overwhelmed with this awareness that this is not possibly how Hashem created us to be. It doesn't make sense to me that Hashem created us that in order to be taking care of our bodies, we have to be hungry at the end of the day. That just
Right.
something didn't add up for me.
Right.
It didn't jive with the stuff I was teaching about how like Hashem created a perfect world and Hashem designed a very brilliant body and our bodies know what to do and um
It wasn't in
Hashem-
alignment with what you were teaching. Like you knew that like
right.
the way that you were behaving didn't align with like your values.
Right, right. Hashem created a beautiful world full of delicious foods, and He wants us to make brachos on them and enjoy them. Just didn't add up. And then the first inkling I had that there was another way to think about this, actually was reading Bina magazine, and there was a short article on intuitive eating, and it listed the 9 principles. This must go back
10 principles. Sorry. The
10
10 principles.
principles. Yeah,
Do you
okay.
know who wrote it?
Who wrote the article?
Yeah. I'm
I
just
don't.
curious.
I don't
Yeah.
remember.
I wonder when it was. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been at this point, gosh, 5, 6 years ago.
That
I
makes
don't even.
sense. Yeah.
I
That's
don't
when
know.
it sort of like entered the Jewish world for sure.
Okay. And I was like, when I was reading it, I got this like sort of fireworks in my head, And I was like, well, this makes sense.
Hmm.
This makes
And
sense.
how long would you say at that point you were already like dieting? Like, was it 10 years? Was it?
Um, at least 10 years. Dieting, probably around 10 years. Yeah.
So it just clicked for you because it was like you said that you had that thought that you were hungry.
Well, it wasn't only that, it was also that despite all my dieting, I wasn't losing any weight.
Right.
The
Like you were
only thing I,
doing it and still
yeah,
nothing was, you
the
weren't getting the
only
results they
thing,
promised you.
no, the only thing I could do was maintain, and that was by being hungry all the time.
Right. Which obviously you're not meant to do.
Right. So I decided to try the intuitive eating principles, although it felt extremely scary to let go of the counting and the weighing and the rules. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I am the kind of person who likes to be in control.
Yeah.
It's really, as I'm speaking this out, I was really like the perfect profile for a person to have like a real problem with eating.
Hmm.
The oldest daughter, I'm an overachiever. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'm competitive. It really, Baruch Hashem, it's that it never became anything serious.
It
Um,
sounds like for a few years you were really struggling. Like the one of my I've said this before on my podcast, but one of my supervisors said that Jessica Setnick, who I interviewed, who's amazing, she said that somebody with an eating disorder thinks about food 80 to 110% of the day, and 110 meaning they even dream about food. You know, the average person thinks about food 30 to 40% of the day. What am I when am I going grocery shopping? What's for dinner? What am I feeding my kids? But when it takes over that much of your headspace, it's a real problem, you know? It really is. That's why like intuitive eating is so like it, a lot of people talk about this like aha moment, like this can't be my life. My life can't be that I should be thinking about food all day, every day. It's like such a poor
right.
quality of life.
It's interesting. I definitely had disordered thinking, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I never felt like I had a problem. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? It's just so interesting. It was so normal. This is what my friends were thinking about. This is what my friends were talking about. I didn't feel like an outlier in any way. And
Right.
now I'm like, well, everybody was all messed up.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean that's how it's really sad to say that, but I feel like I also hear that a lot from my clients like but everybody talks about dieting and everybody normalizes it. So does everyone have disordered eating? Like maybe maybe like, um
But now I feel like it's out of vogue. Like I was at a simcha recently and I heard two of my relatives talking about how they were strict and they don't eat this and they don't eat that and this one looks great and she lost so much weight and she's so proud of her. She tried so hard. And I'm thinking to myself, like, are we stuck like 10 years ago? Like, have you not moved forward with society? This is off, you guys. I didn't
but
say
not
anything
really. But not
about that.
really. I mean, I think you just probably have a lot of clarity around it
I
that
do.
yeah.
But I do have to tell you, like, I still every now and then slip back into thinking, well, maybe I could lose weight, because
Mm-hmm.
I do weigh a lot more than I used to. I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but most of the time I'm at peace with it. I'm okay. I'm not gonna say that I love it, but most of the time I'm okay with it.
Right. So I actually just posted about this on Instagram. I could send you the post. So I said I had a baby a few weeks ago and I took a picture of myself in the mirror and I posted um a reel, which I don't really know how to do the reel, so it didn't come out
Oh, I
exactly
have
as
no idea how to do. I just did one and like it was a bit of a disaster, but yeah.
it was it got the message across, but it wasn't, as professional as I wanted it. But basically I said, I feel like you could relate to this because I've listened to a lot of your content. um, I said what we think body image work is, right? So that was the first picture, and it said like, um, I'm supposed to love my body, so I like I'm feeling negative about my body, but I'm supposed to love my body, so fine, I'll just reject that feeling, something like that. And then I said something like, but what body image work really is? Body image work is stating how you feel. I feel like I don't feel good about my body. I feel like my body's big, or I feel like, my society won't accept me this way. And then, so I talked about like facing it, tracing it, and replacing it. So I'm facing it. Here's my thought. Like, I don't like the way my body looks. I want to be skinnier. Um, so then we trace it. Why do I want to be skinnier? Because society around me tells me like I'm not pretty if I'm not skinny. My friends, I used to get compliments when I was skinny or things like that. Like I'm tracing, I'm really understanding where it's coming from and replacing it with what my values really are. Like you said before, you weren't living like within your values. So my values are that like I'm so much more than a body. My values are that I'm so blessed that I was able to carry this baby. My values are that bodies change. Like I'm so much more than my weight, and like it's not body image work isn't saying like I don't really love my body, but I'm going to say I love my body because I believe in body positivity. It's like doing that work.
Mhm, mhm,
So that makes sense that you're not. I think that the beauty industry, the whole beauty industry, which is like an $80 billion industry per year, like preys on us, making us feel like we're not pretty enough. And if we like tried a little harder by buying their products, then
mhm.
we'd be prettier, then we'd be skinnier, then we'd be happier. But like you said, you were on a dieting for 10 years. You never got the result that you wanted. It's
No,
a lie, basically.
right. It's a lie.
So then how did you sort of like move forward with intuitive eating or with like your dieting and stuff?
So it wasn't like this immediate switch. It was a gradual, it was like a, one, two steps forward, one step back. So I
Hmm.
showed it to my daughter. I was like, this is fascinating stuff. Like, what do you think about that? And we really embraced it together. Um,
How old was your daughter at the time?
Probably 18.
And was she also like interested in dieting or interested in?
No,
No, you just showed
no.
it to her because you wanted her opinion.
Yeah, like we like have a similar wavelength. We show each other interesting articles or things that we read, and we like bond over reading.
That's so cute.
So, yeah, so she was like, wow, this is fascinating. I said, I know, and it makes so much sense. Like, this is how Hashem created our bodies. We have hunger signals, like Hashem made us with brilliant bodies, but we've spent so much time not listening to our bodies and turning down the voice of our stomach,
Hmm.
because of our brains are messing us up and our culture is messing us up. Um, and she, Baruch Hashem, has like such a great attitude towards food. And a couple of my daughters have come back from seminary and told me that they're so grateful, um, that so many of their friends get pressure from their older female relatives to look a certain way, to be a certain way, and that they never felt that kind of pressure at home, and that they're so grateful that I can go out and enjoy my food, and we can go out for pizza together. Nobody's making comments about the cheese and the pizza and the cheeseless, gluten-free cauliflower pizza,
Right.
which is not pizza.
No, it's not pizza.
Um, and we crack jokes about it now. Like she'll be like, "Oh, you're gluten free. Cool. Can I have your extra gluten?" My one daughter told me she was in seminary. She's like, "Mom, you have no idea how many girls are gluten free, and it's code for dieting.
Yeah.
But it's out of vogue to say you're dieting, so
All
you're
right.
gluten free."
I know. It's
We
so
shared this.
sad.
What?
It's so sad.
It is.
I know.
Um, we shared this funny video about some guy doing this like man on the street interview in California and saying to people like, "Are you gluten free?" And if they said yes, they would be like, "What's gluten?" Did you see
Yeah.
that?
I saw that. Yeah. It's
Like
really funny.
nobody knows what gluten is.
Yeah. It's
But
really funny. It's
anyway, I
true.
definitely feel like a strong sense of freedom.
Hmm.
And I will also say that this occurred to me recently. I would rather be in a bigger body today than I used to, and not be happy with it some of the time, than be dieting and not be happy with what I'm eating all of the time.
Right. Right. And I guess that's the point, right? Is that like when people are engaging in dieting, like they're not even happier. Like they're just so there's just always like I could be skinnier, I could be more, I could have more willpower, I could be more obsessed with it. It's like it's almost like you just never feel good about it. It kind of perpetuates you not to feel good about your body.
Right. And that's also what I realized is that the size of a person's body is totally uncorrelated to their satisfaction with their body.
Totally.
So you can have somebody who is objectively thin, whatever that means, and they're not happy with how they look. And then you can have somebody who's larger and they are happy with how they look. So you think that happiness is correlated with size, but it absolutely isn't.
Right. Again, it's like the societal push of like you're never skinny enough, like you're never pretty enough, so that like it really has nothing to do with actually how you look. It has to do with how you feel about yourself. And
Yes.
that sort of comes out like if you that's why body image work is so much deeper than like people think again, people think body image work is like I don't like my body, how can I change my body? The more you try to change your body, the less you accept your body, the more you hate your body, which is really like, I guess, ironic because people don't see it like that.
Right.
It's more like I just had a conversation with a client today that like dieting is so alluring because it's like you said before about being in control. Like, I don't like my body. Okay, I'll change it. I have that control, but we don't have that control. So like to believe that is a false sense of hope. And I understand why people don't like have a really hard time getting rid of diet culture because it really does give them that sense of control. But then it's like if you reflect on like all those years of dieting, it's like
Yeah.
not giving you what you think you're getting.
Right. I mean, and it's also like a little bit of a package deal. Like, for example, I remember telling myself when I started getting gray hair, I said, I will never color my hair. And I mean, lots of people color their hair. People who cover their hair color, like color kavod. Everybody should do whatever they want. I felt that I didn't want to feel pressured or stressed to have another thing to buy and do to make my body look a certain way. So I was recently at an event and my hair is gray at my temples and I was wearing like a band fall and some of my hair was showing at my temples. And one of my relatives said, "Oh, Ruchi, time to color your hair." And I said, "Absolutely not."
Good for you.
But
Good for you.
it's such a like it wasn't even considered like a hurtful comment. It was
Right.
just like, oh, of course. Well, of course now you're going to color your hair, right?
Right.
No, I'm not. It's almost like so like daring to
Like
say
countercultural.
I don't have to buy into that, standard. Like when my daughter got married 6 months ago,
Mazel
people were like,
tov.
"Oh, you're gonna diet, fit into the dress." I'm like, actually, I'm gonna buy a dress that fits my body.
Right.
I'm
Right.
telling you, it was like I was speaking Greek. It was like people do not you see this like look of shock on people's faces, like what does that even mean? And it's fascinating because it's like no matter what you look like, you should lose weight for your daughter's wedding. Why?
Hmm.
So you buy a dress that's too small for you, and I've told my kids, and I'm like, if there's something, they'll put something on, they're like, oh, I can't stand the way this looks on me, or oh, this is so uncomfortable. I'll be like, get rid of it. Your
Hmm.
body deserves to have clothing that feels good on you.
For
You know,
sure.
like
Yeah.
why would you do that to yourself? Would you tell your friend to wear something uncomfortable?
It's like I try to neutralize it like shoes. Like, would you try to it's like how they used to like bind people's feet to make them fit into
Right?
it's the same thing. Like we bind our body, like but it doesn't fit. It's not supposed to fit you. It's okay. Bodies come in all
Right.
shapes and sizes. It's funny though, because you're saying like you said before, like it's so common, like people's disordered eating. And this is also so common, like for people, like your daughter gets engaged, you're going on a diet. And it's like you are sort of like I hear this from clients all the time, like, how could I not diet? How could I not color my hair? Everyone's doing it. And it's like, yeah, you could not do that. Like just think about how it's not serving you. Like if it was
Yeah.
serving you, then go for it. But like if it's making you
Yeah.
feel terrible, then you don't have to do that.
And the way I know that I'm at the weight that Hashem intended me to be is because I eat, sometimes I eat food that's more nutritious and sometimes I eat food that's less nutritious. I basically eat when I'm hungry. I rarely overeat because I mean eat to the point of discomfort because I'm not in a I'm not in a state of deprivation. So I don't
Hmm.
feel like I have to shovel it in. Like it'll always be there. I can always have it later, right? Um, and I basically stay. I do still weigh myself. That's something I would like to get rid of, but I still do that. So like I go on a vacation and I indulge in delicious foods at great restaurants. So I'll gain a couple pounds, and then a week later it'll fall off because that's
Hmm.
my body. My body is constantly like gravitating back to the same place. You know, I had Lyme disease last year. I
Oh
lost
wow.
10 pounds because
Wow.
I had no appetite for 2 months because it took a while for us to figure out what it was.
Mm.
And I was like, this is weird. And I knew that I was going to gain those 10 pounds back because once my body had a normal appetite, and I could like enjoy my food again, I knew I was going to go back to that place and then I was going to plateau there because that is my body's ideal weight. That's where it constantly settles when I'm eating like a normal human being. And
Hmm.
it did. And I wasn't the beautiful part, and this is how I knew that I had sort of arrived at the place I want to be with all of this. I wasn't dreading those 10 pounds coming back. I'm like, right, this is where my body is supposed to be.
Right.
That was sick me. This is healthy me.
Right. Right. I actually just interviewed Barry from
Oh,
Bariana, and she
yeah,
talks
yeah,
about her story with
yeah.
Lyme disease and losing weight and how she
She
got
had it
praised
for
for
much
it.
longer than I did, I think.
Yeah. And she lost a lot of weight and she was praised and she's like, I'm sick. It's like
Right.
when we praise weight loss, we're oftentimes praising like someone's illness, depression or cancer, God forbid, or Lyme disease, or
Mhm,
again, like just disordered eating disorders.
mhm.
So it's true. It's something called the set point weight that your body, like I always say this, I probably said it a bunch of times on the podcast already, but like I worked in nursing homes for 5 years as a clinical dietitian. And part of our job in the nursing home is to really, really, really track people's weights. So we're like, everyone has to be weighed every month, right? So like if anybody has a significant weight change, 5% in 1 month or 10% in 6 months, then they get flagged for something and we have to do like a whole workup because bodies aren't even whether they lose weight or gain weight, because bodies don't just lose weight or gain weight
Mhm,
unless
mhm.
something's going on, right? It's really just a medical indicator of something. But once we start to play around with it, our bodies don't want to change weights. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
We're supposed to stay like at our set point weight.
Mhm.
So it only really like changes when we start to manipulate it. And oftentimes like the more we diet, like the higher our set point weight gets because we like slow down our metabolism. So it's interesting that like the more we're trying to manipulate our weight to lose weight, the more like the set point really raises usually.
Hmm.
That's the way it works. So I guess what comes to mind for me is that like something that always like kind of bothers me about this is that like I feel like it's become so much a part of like our Jewish culture, this like
Oh yeah.
diet
Oh yeah.
culture stuff, like shidduchim being a certain weight, um, talking about yantif and weight loss and all that stuff. Like, I still kind of like don't understand how it happens, like how we've let it happen. That like you were saying before, everyone talks about it, like about your daughter's wedding or like at a Shabbos meal or a yantif. Like for me, at least, I hear it all the time, everywhere. It's so common talk about dieting, weight loss, praising people's weight loss. Like, do you think that there's something we could do about that? I mean, I'm trying to do something about it, but like how did that happen?
So I think that a part of it is our from media. And there are a lot of topics that from media are not going to cover because they're not sneeze or inappropriate or not relevant to our culture. But one of the things that they can hyper focus on is food. And if you look at our from women's magazines, an inordinate amount of space is dedicated to food, whether it's what you should make, what you should cook, what you should bake, nutrition, dieting, exercise. They don't call it dieting anymore because that's out of vogue. So
Right,
they'll call it, oh, I don't know, they'll call it nutrition,
right.
or they'll call it health and
Lifestyle,
wellness.
right?
But
Health and
it's
wellness, yeah.
really a lot of it is diet culture in disguise. I once counted, I don't want to mention the name of a From Women's magazine, a full half of the pages were devoted to food related issues,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
many of which contradicted each other.
right,
Here's an amazing pizza recipe. Oh, don't eat pizza.
right,
Here's how you should exercise if you mistakenly chas v'shalom ate pizza. Do you know what I mean?
right.
So that's a part of it for sure.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
from media most definitely shapes our thoughts and culture. And a lot of the from world is also exposed to non-from media and culture, and that also shapes a lot of, what we think in terms of what a model should look like, what a face full of makeup should look like, and that's problematic, obviously, for other reasons. Um, I don't know. I think that there's also a big focus on looking good, in the firm world. Like I've noticed that the non-firm world, and this is the world I work in, I'm in Kiro, the non-firm world has become increasingly casual. People are wearing yoga clothes. They're not wearing makeup. If you see a woman with a face full of makeup, chances are she's from.
Interesting.
Our shetels are,
Really?
yeah, oh yeah, definitely in Cleveland. This is what I'm seeing.
Right. Wow, that's so interesting.
Um, our shetels are done to perfection. Nobody's hair looks that good ever.
Isn't it?
Unless they have a full-time stylist. Whose hair looks that good? Nobody's.
Right.
Um, that's also part of why I wear a lot of tickles. I'm like not really into that whole thing. I mean, that's a whole separate topic, but I
I
just
would love to hear.
I just think that as a culture, girls and women are expected to look good. You know,
Hmm.
like when I was growing up, I grew up with, my grandparents were Hasidish, like the word was balabatish. You should look like Bakavadik. You should look
Hmm.
fine. You should look respectable. Like going out in your yoga clothes without makeup, that's like sloppy, messy. That's not respectable. So a
Hmm.
respectable person is wearing expensive clothing. They've got their makeup done right. Like even this whole culture where girls, this is not such a Cleveland thing, but where girls will go, when they're going into 11th grade and they're allowed to start wearing makeup and they'll go to like a professional makeup artist to buy their first makeup and teach them how to wear. I don't know. When I was growing up, we went to the drugstore. We bought some,
Right.
mascara. We tried it on in the bathroom mirror at school, and we hope nobody noticed. That was the
Right.
whole,
Yeah.
process. But now everything is very like official and formal, and it all has to look really good. And then for sure, when you're going into shidduchim, you're going to be all outfitted with the right clothing and the right makeup and the hair extensions. And it's, I'm going to say,
Interesting.
it's an ugly part of our culture, to my view. It's
Yeah.
overly materialistic.
Hmm.
It's unhealthy. It promotes a standard of beauty that is perfectionistic and damaging.
That's interesting. I tell this to clients a lot that we become obsessed with, in a way, I think we become obsessed with food in our culture because, kind of like what you said, but a little different, that there's no other like kosher entertainment.
Yeah,
So, like, going out to eat, watching Instagram stories about food, that's like very kosher entertainment. So, like, what else is there? But yeah, like it's interesting because I do have like I've had over the years a lot of like Hasidish clients who don't even have Instagram. They don't have any form of media, but they tell me like that it's still very much a part of their culture that like a wife should be skinny for her husband. And I'm like, where did you get that? Like, where did that come from? It's not a Jewish value. And again, like I'm not talking about it. It sounds very extreme what I'm saying. I still think it is very important to take care of your body and focus on, having fruits and vegetables and sleep, hygiene, and moving your body. Those are all really important things, making sure you do look presentable. But of course, there's like a standard, like that you don't have to look perfect and your makeup shouldn't be done by a makeup artist and your shadel doesn't have to look perfect. You don't even have to wear a shadel. I live in New York, so like I grew up out of town. I grew up like in a really small town, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but it is like it's funny because I live in the five towns and I don't like I maybe I've just like rejected the standard, but like I don't feel that much pressure to like look perfect because I feel like it's like maybe like I just have to be like true to who I am. I don't feel like everyone's like that. Obviously there are more fancy people, less fancy people, but
right. Well, I have for sure rejected the culture. Like I said, I wear a lot of tickles. I get my clothes on Amazon. Like I'm not buying into that whole mishigas. I'm just
right.
not.
But is that your personality or is that like what you've sort of like moved into because you've rejected diet culture, which is so much a part of the bigger culture, you know? I'm actually thinking
Um,
about that for myself. That's probably why also. Like I've rejected diet culture, so like I'm just like this is me. Like take it or leave it.
it's hard to know which came first, the chicken or the egg. It probably goes
Right.
hand in hand. I am a very independent and critical thinker. I don't like to do what everybody else is doing. Like even I remember when everybody was reading Harry Potter. This is such a dumb example, but I was like, I don't need to read Harry Potter just because everybody else is reading Harry Potter. I'll read it when I'm good and ready to read it. Thank you.
I
You
get that. I
know.
totally get that. I didn't read Harry Potter either, so you have like that rebel side of you.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But a part of it also is I'm always looking for like a better way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm always sort of mistrustful of like, oh, everybody's doing that, but that doesn't seem very effective or efficient. Well, I don't have to do that.
Right.
That is a part of my personality,
Is
and
it a
that's
confidence
probably
thing also? Like you seem that you have to have a lot of confidence to do that.
I am a
Yeah.
confident person for sure. Most of the time. Um, but I'm also like I get very impatient with stupid trends. Like I almost feel like, well, I'm not gonna be duped by that scam. like
Right.
everybody else
Skeptical. You're a
is.
skeptic. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually am.
Yeah.
And I tell this to people when I teach Torah. I'm like, I'm not one of those people who believes everything they hear,
Right.
right? I'm much more likely to believe something is a scam and then it's not than to
Right.
believe something's not a scam and then it is.
That's interesting.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, when
Yeah.
I hear something, I question it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't sound like, show me the source for that, please. I would like to know who said that. Like, I'm not
Right.
repeating or reposting something unless I'm, pretty sure. I'm always one saying, yeah, that's a hoax, that's a scam, that's not true.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a big killjoy like that. So in a way, it was almost like I was like, well, why do I have to wear a sheitel just because everybody else is wearing a sheitel? I happen to like scarves, and I happen to think that it's more authentic for me. So okay, fine.
Right.
I don't have to do it just because I don't have to color my hair just because everybody else is. I don't have to keep dieting when it seems to me that it's insane, ridiculous, unsustainable, and super annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I guess my question is, I mean, you might have to think about it for a while, but like, what do we do as like a society in terms of like diet culture? Well, actually, because you said you do Kira, like I thought that maybe diet culture is stronger in the outside world, but you're saying that there's this more like casual
I don't
feel.
see that.
You see it more
Um,
in the frum world.
well, let's put it this way. I definitely see it in both worlds. But I think that from people are more blithely unaware that there's another option
Interesting.
because from people are very much in their own little bubble.
Right. Right.
I don't think it's dawned on them yet. Like like you said, intuitive eating did come into the firm world, let's say whatever it was 6, 7 years ago. But I still think that diet culture has a chokehold on the firm community that has not
Hmm.
let up yet.
Hmm.
And in the non-firm world, I think again, what people do in the privacy of their own minds, I don't know, but it's definitely like talking about dieting is pretty out of vogue.
Hmm. So what
Yeah.
do we like? I know you said that like you never spoke about it in your home, and that's amazing that your girls came back from seminary and they were so able to like not engage in that type of behavior because that is when a lot of people become like
Well, I'm not
heavily
going to say that
exposed.
none of them ever engage in that behavior, but what I am saying is that I do feel grateful. I don't think that's something they got from me.
Hmm. Or it's not something that they're like obsessed with, or it's like
Right.
taken over their life. So what do you think we could do about it? Like, what do you think, what's like a good solution to like, I know like part of me is like, I try to like speak in the schools and like spread the message, but like, it's a big problem, like it's a big issue that like, so what you were describing on the 10-year journey of dieting, like so many people are still on that journey, even when they do hear about intuitive eating.
Right. So, I struggle with how vocal to be about how damaging dieting is because I don't, I'm not a confrontational person and I don't need to be, sometimes I just don't feel like being the educator all the time. So, like, I was at this simcha recently, and like I told you, two of my relatives were just going on and on and on about this one dieting, and that one looks great, and that one's a little chubby, but then she dieted, and all her sisters dieted with her just to show her that they were with her, solidarity, blah, blah, blah. And then, they were talking about how, well, they're eating this because they're on vacation, but really they never let themselves eat this, and a part of me was like, really just wanted to speak up, and I did say, I was like, oh, I don't diet anymore, but then they looked at me a
Did
little
they
funny.
faint? Yeah.
They looked at me a little funny, like, wait, what did she just say? Okay, we must have heard her wrong. And then they just kept on talking. But then I just decided, like, I don't I don't feel responsible to educate the world. I do a lot of things like communally. And when it comes to this, I don't feel like I need to take up that, you know, mantle of responsibility and leadership. I'm tired. There are so many societal issues that need to be repaired, whether in the from world or the non-from world. And that's what I do in my like day job.
Hmm.
And so, I just feel like I personally don't feel like taking on that responsibility. I'm just going to do what I do, lead by example, and whoever
Hmm.
happens to notice and ask me questions, I'm more than happy to share. And sometimes I will say like, someone will say, "Oh my gosh, are you going to have ice cream?" And I'm like, "Totally, I'm going to have ice cream." So I just try to project my joy in
Hmm.
enjoying my food. But I personally don't feel like I'm ready to be this like activist around that. What could we do better as a society?
I appreciate your answer though. I just want to say that before you continue because I don't know if you read the book Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison, who has a really good podcast on intuitive eating. She's been doing it for a really long time. She probably has like 200 or 300 episodes. I recommend it a lot. Um, she does the first half of the book is talking about diet history, like how it came to be,
Mhm,
which is really interesting. And the second half of the book is how to use intuitive eating in your everyday life, which, like you said before, you felt like that lack of control is really hard. Like
mhm.
people do, I totally validate that, experience that. And for those who've been dieting for like 10 plus years, and then to say like, make peace with food, it's like really scary. Like
Right.
there is definitely like you can't go from one to the next. There's like a journey.
Yeah.
But she explains that like in the beginning, like you might feel this like responsibility. I have to tell everybody about it. And like those two women speaking at the wedding, I'm going to go correct them. But like that also is emotional energy. And you don't have to do that if you don't want to do that. So
Yeah.
just like that's a boundary thing.
Right. Um, as a society, I definitely do feel there is work to do. Something tells me it starts, as you mentioned, on a school-wide level. And I feel that if there was some way to do this, that teachers and school personnel should be trained
Yeah.
in how to talk about these issues with students, to mindfully talk about these issues with students. For example, I give a Parsha class. I teach a Parsha class every Shabbos morning, and so when I was first learning about intuitive eating, I decided to do a Parsha class about it. There's
So
one
nice.
woman who comes to my Parsha class who struggled for a long time with an eating disorder, and I let her know in advance. I said, I just want you to know I'm going to be talking about diet culture. And if you're going to find that triggering, like I just want to give you permission not to come. Um, and there were some people in my community who at that time were selling diet products, and they, it was a little confrontational of me, not my usual fare,
Yeah.
but I felt like it had to be said. And it was the parsha where it says, actually, I think it's this week's parsha, "V'yachalta v'savato v'rachtas Hashem lokecha," that you
Mm-hmm.
shall eat and be satisfied, and you shall bless Hashem your God. And I was saying like this really, to a large degree, sums up the Torah's attitude about food. Like eat,
Mm-hmm.
enjoy, and say
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Right.
And our society has so conspired about that. Don't eat, don't enjoy,
Right.
deprive and restrict. Um, one guy came over to me after my Persia class and he said, I usually like your Persia classes, but not this week. I said, okay, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You're right. Not everyone's gonna like what you have to say about this
yeah,
specifically is
but
very
from
controversial.
a perspective from a perspective of Judaism, that
Mm-hmm.
even people say like, this cleanse and this toxic superfood, all that language. It's like Hashem made a liver. Your liver is there to cleanse. You don't need, just along the lines of like how Hashem created these amazing, beautiful bodies. And it's not about what your body looks like. It's about what your body can do. Your body is there to carry around your neshama and do good things in this world. And we spend such a lot of time over identifying as a body.
Mm-hmm.
Our body is just a container for our soul,
For
and
sure.
I think that this kind of education when it comes to kids, and then also training teachers and school personnel to look out for the signs of disordered thinking and the signs of pre-eating disorders,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think there is much more awareness than there used to be. But really,
Yeah.
I mean, educating adults, don't talk like this around your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make every simcha and yantif about weight loss.
Yeah.
It's not healthy and it's not Jewish.
I love what you just said, and I will say that like I have gotten some interest from the schools around here and schools in other places actually. So I do think that there is hope. There is some
I
recognition that
think
we
we're
need
moving
to.
in the right direction. I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, yeah. I really appreciate like your story, even though when we before we started recording, you're like, I don't have such a fantastic story. I love the story. I think it's so honest and open. I also appreciate that like maybe you're not the face of intuitive eating. Like I didn't know this whole story about you just from following you, but I appreciate that you don't feel like you have to like scream it from the rooftops, but you also have like so much to share about it. I really think it could be, I'm already thinking of so many people listening to this episode, thinking like just validating their experience of like those years that diet culture like steals from you and then like getting your life back. It's like very empowering.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Thank you.
really appreciate you sharing your story.
And you're doing great work. Keep doing it. We need more people. I'm not shouting it from the rooftops for various reasons. I did at one point, but I'm very grateful to the people who are, because our society needs to hear these messages.
Yeah, yeah. And one other thing that came to mind as I was saying it is that like a lot of times like clients don't know how to talk to their kids about these things or they shy away. Like if a kid says like that person's so fat, and like I'm like they're like I was so uncomfortable, I was so scared. I'm like, no, encourage the conversation. What's wrong with being fat? Why are you making fun of that person for being fat? Or like
Yeah.
like one of my relatives was here asking me about what I do and like really kind of like grilling me, not in a bad way. She just really wanted to understand and my 9-year-old was listening and I was happy for her to listen because I want her to know like kids should really hear how we don't believe in diet culture and how damaging it is because they
Yeah.
will go to school and hear about it and we have
Yeah.
to teach them.
So true. I'll just add one more way this comes up in my teaching. So I recently took a course to teach Taras HaMishpacha to non-from Kalas, with Rachel Goldbaum and Tamar Livingston. It's been an incredible, incredible opportunity.
Wow.
And one of the things they talk about, which is true for either a non-from Kala or a from Kala, that there's a whole session on getting ready for the mikvah, and to use that opportunity to talk about body image, because
Yeah.
a lot of times like women are getting ready for the mikvah and they have to look at themselves and they're not happy with what they see, and it can very much negatively impact how they feel about their body and how they feel about the mitzvah. And so I was teaching Akala and I was telling her about that, and I was like, when you get ready for the mikvah, it's such a beautiful opportunity to, instead of hyper focusing on what your body looks like, is to remember to thank your body for all the amazing things it does. And she was like, she's like, oh my gosh, I never heard that before.
Wow.
And it was really a game changer for her. And like, I feel like these are the messages that can be woven into anybody who's involved in education with girls and women.
That's such an important point. I haven't figured out exactly how to do this yet on the podcast. Maybe you'll come back on to talk about this, but I always say like intimacy and married life always comes up in my sessions because like you can't
Mhm.
really separate body image
Right.
from like those issues with food and stuff like that. So um it's that is a really important that's a really important part. Okay. Okay. It was really sorry, I know I'm keeping you very long. Could you
No,
just tell
no,
the listeners
it was a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
yes. Do you want to tell the listeners where they can find you? And I'll put everything in the show notes.
Absolutely. So I'm on Facebook, but I don't like Facebook anymore. So instead, you should follow
Okay.
me on Instagram.
Okay.
I
What's
have
your
a
handle?
blog,
What's your
uh,
handle on Instagram?
Ruchi Koval, very
Okay.
straightforward. I have a blog. I have 11 years worth of writing. It's called
I love
outoftheorthobox.com.
that. I love that. Okay.
I have two books. One is called Conversations with God, Prayers for Jewish Women, and one is called Soul Construction, which is a modern day Musar book. And my podcasts, I have two podcasts. Just look up my name, Ruchi Koval. I have an app. It's called Ruchi Koval, and it has a lot of
Wow.
my classes on there.
Wow.
Um, I also have two Zoom classes weekly. If anybody wants to participate in those, just Google me and email me, and I'm happy to connect. Yes, together.
That's amazing. Okay, I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. This was
My
amazing.
pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Have a great day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.